So let's talk about float choice for canal systems, especially navigational canal systems. We're on the Aero collar today. It's deep, there's a lot of undertow, there's a lot of power through that canal because it's a navigational canal. Therefore the locks get opened a lot because of boat traffic, it pulls a lot, it tows a lot, there's skim, there's all these elements that you've got to contend with, including the depth that you're fishing in. So where I'm fishing today, it's 9.5, nearly 10 foot deep. I've got to use the right float. So of course, when we're looking at the depth of the canal, I'd say, let's say for example, the water line is up to this bristle here. This area here is the most precarious area. And what I mean by that is, this is the area we've got to cut through to create that bait presentation. At the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve is the more natural our hook bait looks, like all the other loose fed particles on the bottom, the more bites we're going to catch. It's as simple as that. So using the right float to aid that principle is so important. So this is a very popular float for this style of fishing, your natural waterways. It's a Sensus Gloucester. Now, what makes this float so special? It doesn't have to be this pattern, but it has to be this shape. So what I want to talk to you about is the shape of the float and the reason behind why I use this pattern. So a Sensus Gloucester has a lovely pear body. So you can imagine the water line is at the bottom of the bristle here. So especially in this area here, this is where the skim is at its highest. The wind movement causes hindrance on your rig. So you can see how it tapers off really quickly here. So you can imagine the skim can cut through that float, which aids your presentation. It means you're not having to move your float as much to aid that stability, which is what you're trying to achieve with your hook bait on the deck. As well as that, it's got a lovely nice bulbous body at the bottom. That aids the float, gives the float that stability, but also for me as the angler, when the canal starts pulling a little bit and I want to maintain my hook bait over where I feel my bed of bait is on the bottom, it allows me to hold against that float. So now the body of the float is staying underneath the surface. The rig, the float more importantly, is cutting through that skim and it's giving me that presentation that I need. And that is from that shape of the body. So if you're looking for an all-round float for these kind of waters, your natural lakes, your canals, your deep canals especially, that is the shape I would look for, definitely. Now, moving down the body of the float, the material of the stem, I cannot stress how important it is. Because of the depth and all these elements that I've already mentioned, a wire stem is absolutely crucial. It aids that stability for that float. It keeps the float straight. And it also means that you can get away using a lighter pattern float, a lighter weight float than what you'd use. Let's say, for example, if this float was, let's say, a cane, a carbon stem, I'd have to step up a weight float to compensate for that because I've lost that stability in this area. So it's really important using the right material for these windy open water places. Now, if you've noticed when I've set it up, I've got 3 rubbers. Now, a lot of people, when they set these kind of floats up, they will set the top rubber right against the body of the float, but I don't want that because it does 2 things. I believe that the line will cut into the body of the float eventually, therefore you could get leakage, you could get excess water getting into the body of that float, into the material and affecting the buoyancy of that rig, and all of a sudden halfway through your session your float starts going underneath and you're having to adjust and take shot off to compensate, and as the day progresses it gets worse and worse. You don't want that. You want efficiency with your float, and by having that rubber just down there puts less tension on the body of the float in that area. So that is a top tip when it comes to setting up your rig. Always make sure that that bottom rubber is away from the body of the float to stop it cutting into the body. Also, what I do at home, if you notice, it's got a lovely shine to it, and I just put, even all my floats, every float that I've got, I just brush on a very thin coating of cellulose dope, which is a very thin varnish, so it doesn't affect the weight or how the float works in the water, but it creates longevity. It means the float is going to last a long time on the winder, with it all ready to be used, you know, with a rig set up, that means I can use that float time and time again, and it's going to work exactly the same time as I've used it before. So that's a top tip when it comes to setting up your rigs and choosing the right float.